Will the Committee on Finance please come to order? There are 4 requests for public comment. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board. Please come up to the microphone as I call your name. We'll begin with Aaron Castañeda, followed by Kevin Weir, Edmund Hakobian, and Tessie Reese.
Hello, my name is Aaron Castaneda. I am the current student body president at Cal State LA. And I wanted to speak today regarding the proposed application fee increase that will be discussed in this committee today, and express my opposition for it, as well as the opposition of prospective students that plan on attending not just Cal State LA, but the CSU in general. This $15 increase is more of a burden on students than it is a benefit to CSU. As the report you will soon be reading, it talks about a $7 million revenue increase over a $6 billion budget, which is, I'm not saying it's nothing, but compared to what a student has to face with a $15 increase, which is a meal or two for those families, especially those that are low-income working families. Especially in a school system that has 1 in 4 students that are facing food and housing insecurity, as a report conducted here by the Chancellor's Office. Furthermore, the change to Title V policy that is also being discussed right now is also equally, more alarming than what it is than the $15 increase. Students for years have known what the fee is going to be every single year, and with this obscure language saying the Board of Trustees will be setting the fee as they choose, obviously voted by here, it's concerning to our students because they won't know what the fee increase will be until July. I'm assuming that will be when the implementation of the fee increase would happen. And given that fees increases are frequent here, it happened on my campus. Our parking fees have gone up 10% every single year, and I just don't want that to be the case for application fees, because students have the right to attend public university, and they shouldn't be put with any burden on just applying into the CSU, let alone the tuition. That's a different conversation, but just to apply into the CSU, we shouldn't be putting more burden on our students. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Kevin Weir, Vice President of the California Faculty Association. I would like to begin this morning by acknowledging that we are on land. We are gathered this morning on land that was stolen from the Tongva people. As faculty prepare for the new academic, boy, that's really bright. As faculty prepare for the new academic year after more than a decade of doing more with less, this university system will have an influx of additional funding, $654 million more. To be sure, a sincere thank you is owed to Governor Gavin Newsom, Speaker Rendon, Senate President Pro Tem Atkins, and our many allies in the legislature who understand the need for more and increased support for the CSU. But faculty and students also deserve a round of thanks for helping increase awareness of the dire need for those funds. This is a story that began back in spring 2017 with the release of CFA's research paper, Equity Interrupted, which showed that the 30-year disinvestment by the state while our university system grew increasingly more diverse. The story continued on April 4th, 2018, when we held a rally that drew more than 1,000 supporters, community allies, and legislators to the Capitol to free the CSU. Faculty and students rallied in support of public education in November at San Diego State with our incoming governor, and faculty and students put in hours of hall walking this spring as we lobbied legislators for additional funding. Our new governor, Gavin Newsom, congratulated faculty and students for our fierce advocacy during our Lobby Day reception last April. Quote, "Over the last decade, we stopped investing in the system, and as a consequence, we have paid a big price. You, faculty and students, brought that advocacy to the forefront. You've been there in every forum, at every critical occasion. I just want to congratulate you for that." End quote. Those are not my words. That's not paraphrasing. That's a direct quote from Governor Newsom to CFA activists. And our advocacy was on our own terms. This year, our story ends well. However, we will continue to watch to ensure the proper dispensation of the $131.2 million to increase student enrollment and the $35 million designated for new tenure track hiring. This last portion CFA alone advocated for. In conclusion, the recent Bureau of State Audit's report makes clear the need for increased transparency. And while we understand setting aside money for an emergency, stashing reserves while faculty are being furloughed with reduced pay is not only shameful, it is exactly the type of emergency to spend reserves upon. We have been advocating for additional oversight on how the CSU spends its money for years. We are glad that the state auditor agrees with us, and we will continue to press this issue until we have satisfactory results. Thank you.
Mr. Hakobian?
My name is Ejmin Hakobian, and I'm here to share my personal opinion. Chair Eisen, it seems like you are not prepared, and the state auditors stated clearly there's a problem with the parking issue, and I directly addressed you that problem. And I've been doing the same thing for the past year now, and I have not heard you nor any of your board members nor the chancellor's office comment on that. That's wrong, and it's in the auditor's report now. You have to do your job or pass the position to someone who's willing to do it. Visionary statements, those are not enough. General comments, those are not enough. You need to be more prepared. Now, moving on to public comments, I was looking at the public comments area when you approved the minutes. Those are all general statements, and for my portion, I want to be stated that Ejmin Hakobian said Chancellor White is incompetent and he needs to be removed because he's the cause of all the problems that we have here. And the CSU doesn't have a funding issue. CSU has a management issue. The top manager, Chancellor White, is incompetent. He doesn't care about the detail, and he always pretends to be caring about the students. And he constantly advocates to increase the fees, and he did it this year shamelessly. So going back to my point, Chancellor White, you've been hiding $1.5 billion operating reserves while you just approved the impaction status of at Cal State LA that's going to reduce enrollment by about 5,000 students within the next couple of years. You have no shame. And later on, either today or tomorrow, you are going to be making an emotional argument about why you were hiding those funds. You're going to lower your head, you're going to take shorter breath, and you're going to act like you're emotional to appeal to the emotions of this body and the public, because you cannot make a logical nor an ethical argument based on the decisions that you have made. And the problems, it's not just you, it's the state democratic leadership who's tolerating incompetence. I have not seen any politician, she's absent, and Gavin Newsom, and the other ones that are not here. I have not seen them run for an office and not say, oh, we care about the children, their future, and their education. And whenever you mess up, there's no one here to hold you accountable. In an article in LA Times, which I'm surprised cover you, given their connection to the Cal State LA campus, you said you want to be accountable to anyone and everyone. Well, I'm here. I've been here for the past year. I'm going to be here until we get rid of you. Lastly, I'm going to say that you need to reverse the moratorium, the decision of impaction at Cal State LA. At least you need to approve a moratorium. I'm not going to back down on that one. Thank you.
I'd just like to state, Chair Kimbell, that I welcome public comment, but it's going to become a habit of mine. Every time I hear a personal attack against the Chancellor or a President, I'm going to correct the record. Unfortunately, the Speaker is far off the mark, and the Chancellor has the full faith, confidence, and support of this board, as do the Presidents.
Can I just say something? Do we have ground rules for public comment? Because it seems to me if the public comment section ought to relate to the items on the agenda where the public comment is being provided. Just free-for-all public comment, I don't think is what we had in mind with the ground rules.
I've tried to work closely with the legal counsel on this, and it's been a bit of a dynamic, but you have a point. And speakers today have not been addressing items on the committee, and I've taken a rather liberal approach, but I'll be taking that under advisement.
But can I comment? And I there while the testimony was extremely critical, and I understand that there was reference to finance and criticism, and while again, this board, I believe we do have deep support of our chancellor. I would want to make sure that when the public comes to testify in front of this board, as long as the contents are measured under the agenda item, but that the public has a full breath to express their satisfaction or dissatisfaction. It is extremely, sometimes as many of us are doing as much as we feel possible to support this university. And dissension is so deeply important to hear oftentimes and to understand. And I understand that there are varying levels of dissension, but I do know that folks travel far and wide to express their feelings, whether they be congratulatory or not. And I want to make sure that that floor in some ways is held. And, it is absolutely to the public here. As a trustee, it is sometimes extremely hard to hear that members of the public don't feel like we're doing our job. And yet, the California State University and its leadership, we are a university system that upholds voice. How do we balance all of that? I think is definitely a question, but I want to make sure that that floor stays open to folks. And again, there must always be parameters to public discourse, but the power of the public being able to express good and bad and not only dissension and congratulatory remarks, I think they all have a place here.
Okay.
Oh, I just want to state for the record, then I appreciate your comments, but the public has always had and enjoyed the full rights of expression, and they will continue to enjoy those rights of expression. And when it comes to words that were just previously expressed, they have consequences, and I will take every opportunity to correct the record and to let the full public know of that counter argument as well when it comes to our staff, because they're doing an incredible job day in, day out, and they do enjoy the support of this board.
Thank you all for your comments.
I have not spoken yet.
Oh, I'm
Tessie Reese.
sorry.
Thank you. I'm Tessie Reese. I'm the Unit 2 Chair, and I work at San Diego State. My comments will be somewhat brief, and it's regarding the admission application fee proposal. And to piggyback on the young man who said earlier about prospective students, whether it's $15 or $100, it's more money on the students. So I'm sure you're going to pass it. The two things I would like to bring to light would be this. First off, it would have been in the spirit of transparency when you say that it's going to the $7 million and ongoing will help with the enhancement of your program that you have taken, the Cal State Apply. It would have been helpful, and maybe you've done this in the past, I don't know. It would have been helpful to know what that program to transfer over cost, as well as ongoing, as well as the enhancement programs and software moving forward, because with any new program, there's always enhancements, new devices, new software to go along with it. That would have been helpful for all to understand what that was. The other thing that concerns me is, as the young man stated, you're changing it to the discretion of the trustees. The concern I have here as well for students moving forward would be this year it'll be $15 increase. Well, the next year, will it be $20 increase? There's no limit to that. And I think that does bring concern for students. And as a grandparent who's going to be paying these fees for my grandchildren when they apply to the CSU, and I'm paying for this, I'm concerned as a grandparent. Thank you.
Apologize again, Ms. Reese. So thank you all for your comments. It's now time for the committee to consider today's consent agenda. Does any committee member wish to remove any item from the consent agenda for further discussion? Okay. Hearing no requests, are there any objections to the approval of the consent agenda? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved. The committee has 2 items on today's discussion agenda. Item 4 is an action item requesting approval of the admission application fee proposal and Title V revision. The item will be presented by Steve Relia, Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Financial Officer, and April Gramo, Director of Enrollment Management Services. Steve, please begin.
Thank you, Chair Campbell. As you will recall, a proposal for a $15 increase to the application fee for admission to the CSU was presented as an information item to the board at its last meeting in May. Increasing the application fee to $70 will enable the CSU to improve the applicant experience and expand their criteria for fee waivers, making the process more equitable and allowing more students to qualify for those waivers. Today's report is an action item requesting board approval of the proposal and the corresponding Title V amendment, which is outlined in the written agenda item. Public notice of the Title V amendment was issued and no comments have been received on the proposal during the 45-day public comment period. I will now turn the presentation over to Dr. April Gromo, Director of Enrollment Management Services, to discuss the proposal, including details responsive to the board's previous discussion of this item. Dr. Gromo?
Thank you, Executive Vice Chancellor Willier. The application fee rate was set in 1989 at $55 per application. Undergraduate applicants to the CSU can qualify for a fee waiver of this application fee based on dependency status, income, and household size. The fee waiver can be used for up to 4 campus applications, which is slightly over the average number of campuses applied to by an applicant. Approximately 46% of applicants receive the fee waiver currently. Application fees are collected centrally and allocated to the campuses where they are used to support the admission process. This includes the individual review of applications, coursework, test scores, and grade point averages. Over the past 3 decades, however, the admission process has grown more complex due to an increasing number of applicants, a broader range of data collected at the point of application, and policies such as redirection. The proposal before the board today would increase the application fee to $70 per application, as detailed in the agenda item. This aligns the CSU application fee with other higher education institutions nationwide and in California. The application fee would not cover the total operating costs of the application review process. However, it will help address expenses associated with the additional complexity of the admission process. We estimate that the proposed increase would yield a total revenue of approximately $42 million annually, a $7 million increase. A portion of the additional revenue will be used to expand the application fee waiver criteria, increasing the number of applicants who qualify for a fee waiver from approximately 46% to approximately 50%. Revenue will also be used to improve the applicant experience by making necessary improvements to Cal State Apply. This includes improved communication with and support for applicants, and additional features such as transfer planning tools and the integration of high school and college electronic transcripts into the system. The revenue will also expand Cal State Apply to better support the Board of Trustees' system-wide redirection policy. I will now turn it back to Executive Vice Chancellor Relia for his closing thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Gromo. Following the May board meeting, we carefully considered other input and suggestions made, including proposals to set a sliding scale for application fees to enact a more significant increase for our out-of-state applications. Analysis of these options demonstrated that the benefit of a clear, consistent message to prospective students and families regarding the application fee and supporting a single consistent waiver amount. In addition, as international and non-resident enrollments are low in the CSU, less than 6% of our enrollment, revenue which might be generated by a differential fee would likely be offset by ongoing declines in international enrollment. Ultimately, increasing the application fee by $15 uniformly was determined to be the best option, preventing applicant confusion and ensuring a smooth operating process that is both efficient and cost-effective. The application fee increase proposed today would increase the number of students who receive fee waivers provide revenue for needed investments in the CSU applicant experience, and support the implementation of the board's new redirection policy. Chair Kimball, this concludes our presentation, and subject to any questions here today, the admission application fee proposal and amendment to Title V await the board's action.
Thank you for your presentation. Because this item involves amending a provision of Title V of the California Code of Regulations, these proceedings are deemed to be a public hearing under the provisions of the California Education Code. At this time, are there any members of the public who wish to comment on this proposed amendment? Okay. So nobody wishes to speak. The public hearing is now closed. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I have a question. I have a question.
Okay.
And maybe I missed it. In the report, in this kind of revision, do we have to, and maybe it was already done and I just didn't hear it or read it, a Title VI analysis and around disparate impact? Was that kind of analysis done based on the fee increase?
Trustee Simon, I'm not familiar with Title VI and that analysis, so that's something we'll have to get back to you on, I think.
No worries.
Okay, well, I think we were going with Trustee Morales.
Yeah, and maybe my comments are actually maybe out of order because I may be jumping into another subject, but this comment made earlier by the student president about future fee changes will be made at the discretion of the trustees. Under what is it, definition A, B, I'm sorry, it's B. I just wonder if that's necessary. By the way, I do support the fee. I think that that considering the rationale for the data that will be collected and facilitating the CSU campuses being able to provide information and facilitate data going to other campuses, which is becoming more and more of a problem in terms of impacted campuses. It makes a lot of sense. But I am troubled about the suggestion that somehow future fees of this sort will be left to the discretion of the board of the trustees, and I just wonder whether that's necessary.
Was that a question? Hugo?
It's a question. It's a question. Why would we want to change the language of Article 3, which fees, Section 41-800.1 application fees? Why do we need to change that section?
Chancellor?
So I'm going to ask our board secretary to comment on this. I think the idea is to, because it's a Title V change, rather than setting it to a number, setting it to the board approval. So if we as staff in the future make a recommendation that the fee should be changed up or down, the board has the freedom to do that rather than doing another Title V change. I think it's just really operational. But Andy, could you comment on that, please?
That is correct, Chancellor. And the language is added in part to do exactly what the Chancellor said and also to explain the justification for the fee. So it puts in the language that is to support the application system.
Yes.
Now, I understand that in the future, it still would have to come to the board, otherwise it cannot happen. So it could be dismissed, or maybe not dismissed, is the wrong word, but it could be, the language could be, yes, it's just procedural.
The idea is to just clarify that, as in the past, the board has the authority and responsibility and accountability for setting this fee. It just means that we will bring it forward as this indicates. So it doesn't change authority or responsibility.
Right. How I read the comment from the student body president that spoke from Cal State LA, it suggests that somehow it'd be easier for this board to hike up these fees, suggesting less notice, which is, I don't know whether it's true or not. Would there be in fact less notice to the public in the future if we were to adopt this?
Not effectively, Trustee Morales. If the board decided to amend or change the fee again in the future, it would still be required to place it on a noticed agenda in compliance with the Bagley-Keene Act. It would have to be posted just like every other action item on the board's agenda 10 days in advance. The public would receive notice of that. The public would have an opportunity to comment on that, and the vote would take place in public. So there effectively would be no change in process.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Next, we have questions from trustees Eisen, Fong, Abrego, Taylor, Lieutenant Governor,
And one.
and then one. Okay.
So I noticed in the comparator list that State University of New York at Albany has a fee listed, which suggested, maybe this is not accurate, but it suggested that they may charge a different fee campus by campus. At SUNY, the UCs, I know, charge the same fee regardless of which campus you're applying to, and obviously we charge the same fee regardless of which campus you're applying to. But I'm wondering if there has been given any thought to having a campus by campus fee, and I have no idea whether there would be some benefits or that would just create a massive headache. But I'm wondering if we've thought about that and if that's a way to distribute parity better.
We have not looked at that in any great detail. I think it would cause a lot of confusion for students across the state as they are applying to multiple campuses. Usually students are applying to 3 to 4 campuses per application cycle. I think it would cause a lot of confusion for applicants.
Trustee Fong?
Thank you. So the application fee revenue collected doesn't fully support the cost of processing all of the applications. What is the full cost to process? And then secondly, if we do not approve of this additional cost, the costs for the application, where would that be covered? Where would it be covered from?
I will address both those questions and then let other people chime in. So that is correct. System-wide, we spend nearly $180 million annually for campus and system admissions activities. And so as the agenda item noted, it would be a total of $42 million is anticipated to be collected annually if this increase is implemented. Inclusive of revenue generated by the proposed increase, campuses and the system would continue to utilize $138 million in general fund and other resources to cover the balance of admission-related expenses. As far as the funding to cover costs for Cal State Apply, the challenge that we have today is that that's a budget request that's done annually, and we try to find funding available to support that. And I'll let anyone else also follow up.
Anyone? Okay. Trustee Abrego?
Just to follow up on Trustee Fong's question, because I'm really concerned about giving the public enough information on how the current fees, application fees are being used and how the new fees will be used. One example of that is the current application fees that are generated. Are those monies designated for campus use, admissions and records offices and procedures? Is that where the monies are kept? The problem I have is this, that we've gone from a paper processing process to CSU Mentor to CSU Apply. And you would think that the use of technology going from the paper process would reduce the cost of processing applications. But instead, we're asking for an increase. So the monies that are collected now by the application process, do the campuses receive that money, 100% of those monies to be invested in A&R activities? And the second, as one of the public speakers noted, that we really are vague on how this monies, the new monies or the $15 increase is going to be put to use, because we're going from enhancing the application process to conducting new type of research on how the application can be expanded. So it's not very concrete, and my concern is being able to tell the public how the monies are going to be used.
The $35 million that is collected annually today is provided to the campuses. The only offset that we take is to offset the cost of credit card processing fees, which is approximately 2% of the funds. So the remaining dollars go to the campuses to support admissions and records processing. For how the funds, the additional $7 million will be used, the breakdown may vary over time. We are early in the stages of Cal State Apply, and also the redirection system-wide policy has required significant changes to the application in order for us to support that. But approximately $2 million would be absorbed by the augmented fee waiver criteria. $3 to $5 million would support the Cal State Apply, including enhancements such as redirection, and then the balance would be distributed to campuses.
Okay, trustees Taylor, Garcia, and Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you very much, Chair Campbell. CSU Apply is a central service that we in effect manage here on behalf of the campuses?
That is correct.
Okay. And the written item says the technology has become increasingly outdated. Can you give me a sense? Is the system we installed 3 years ago and now it's like,
That
4 generations behind, or is it 30 years old, or what?
Yeah, that reference was actually to CSU Mentor.
Ah, okay.
We, in the past 10 years of using the application CSU Mentor, did not really invest a lot of funding into that application.
Right.
Also, the technology that was used by that vendor was very outdated. For example, they did not have an off-site disaster recovery situation. So if they lost our application, all of our data would be lost. So it was outdated. So we did go through a comprehensive process to select the new vendor and work with the technology that they have to use it for CSU needs. Part of the cost of the application is that there are very specific things as California State University that we have to collect for federal, state reporting and other requirements.
Right. Thank you very much. And members, I'm going to vote in favor of this. I'm struck by the fact that we can actually add more fee waivers, not fewer, and support more low-income students, not fewer, which I think is a real positive from this. I will also say that I've done a little back-of-the-envelope figuring that if this fee had kept pace with inflation, it would be $113.85 today. And while I don't think all of our fees should keep track with inflation, the fact we haven't touched this one for 30 years tells me that maybe now is a good time to review. So I urge a yes vote.
Yeah, looking at the comparable institutions in California, if we were to increase our fees to the $70, we'd be second only to Stanford and USC's fees. And I think that should tell us a lot about where we're going with this fee. Private institutions are generally significantly more expensive than public institutions, and public institutions, particularly we at the CSU, pride ourselves in providing quality educational opportunities, and the keyword is opportunities, to students who would not otherwise have them available. And I think that using the fact that we haven't updated this fee in years shouldn't be enough to justify increasing the fee. I mean, like I said, we really pride ourselves on being the more affordable option, and it should be celebrated rather than used to increase these fees. Moreover, we talk about barriers, right? And I'm alluding to GI 2025 a little bit, how some of their goals are to remove barriers that can prevent our students from graduating. This is a barrier, at least to me, it seems like a barrier to students that aren't even enrolled yet. It seems like a barrier to students that haven't taken their first class, students that most of them have not taken their first steps onto our campuses. And even though we're restructuring the fee waivers, I would encourage you all to think about the students that, well, I would encourage you to think about two things. First, not to think of it as simply, oh, we're increasing it by $15. Think of it as now our students have to pay $70. And second, think about the students that are on the margin, right? The students that barely, fail to meet the requirements, I guess, to qualify for these fee waivers. So, frankly, as a student, and mainly as a student, I guess, I cannot support this fee, and I would encourage you all to think about, the overall consequences of this. So, thank you.
Yes, Lieutenant Governor?
So I'd just like to associate my comments with those of Trustee Garcia. And I fully recognize, Peter, what you're saying. And if the total cost of processing applications is $180 million a year, and currently we're collecting something in the 35 million a year, clearly this is being supported by other sources of revenue, as it likely is for all these other universities on your list. But it is the first barrier to entry. And in the year that the general fund allocation to the system is the highest year-on-year increase that we've had, seems to me this might be a good one to defer and to keep at the lower rate. It is a signal to students that we recognize the hardship and the cost of applying for so many of our students being the first in their family to go to college, and that the first barrier to entry symbolically and as a practical matter should be as low as possible.
Trustee Carney?
So at the time of applying on Cal State Apply, do students know whether the campus to which they might be interested in applying is an impacted campus, and what the admission requirements are, and what the acceptance rates are, so that they can make informed choices about which campuses they actually apply to, so they can figure out where their best chances of admission would be?
On the actual application, there is not information about the impacted campuses, but on the Cal State Apply website, we provide significant information about which campuses are impacted, which majors are impacted, and we have search tools available for students to use or applicants to look at which majors are impacted at which campuses. In addition, every year at the CSU counselor conferences, where we do sessions in front of thousands of high school counselors up and down the state of California, we do discuss which campuses are impacted, if there are any impaction updates based on the annual review process. And then last year, we actually instituted a session that I do myself to discuss which campuses are impacted, encouraging high school counselors to think about the academic preparation of the applicants and the fit for them for campuses, and also re-reviewing all of the tools available around impaction and looking at the 23 campuses.
Thank you.
Okay, Trustee Eisen?
So I was struck by the 180 million, because if I'm correct, that's to process 1 million applications, or $180 to process a single application. Is that really the cost to process a single application? And to the extent that we can raise money by lowering cost, is there some way we can get that $180 per application amount down so that we don't have to raise the application fee to cover our costs? And I don't know how that, was it $200 per application in the past, or 500, or has it been going up or down? It just seems like per Jack's comment about the student housing, just seems like a lot of money to process a single application. But maybe I just don't know what the world is like in terms of processing applications.
Well, I'll start, and someone else may have additional comments. So the system-wide activities around admissions are not just processing applications. We have outreach support that goes out to the different high schools and community colleges to support the application process. We have EAP coordinators, which are working with the high schools around the Smarter Balanced Assessment and the EAP, the Early Assessment Program that happens in 11th grade. Also, admissions offices are also expanding their role in processing transfer credit. So with the number of applicants who come to us, not only first-time freshmen, but community college transfers, transfer credit processing in a timely manner is really critical to students to be able to start on the right foot at the CSU and understand what college credit they already have and know what classes they need to take to graduate on the most efficient path possible. So there are other activities that goes into the system-wide admissions costs.
Garcia?
How many campuses can a student apply to under one fee waiver?
4.
Students can apply to as many campuses as they wish, but the application fee waiver lets them apply to up to 4 campuses for free.
Okay, and only one fee waiver per student, I'm guessing, right?
It's well, they get 4 fee waivers because they're applying to 4 applications, and then they get those per term. So if a student applied in fall, they get 4 application fee waivers. If they came back and applied in spring, they get 4 more. And if they applied in winter, they could also get 4 fee waivers.
So if a student wishes to apply, if you don't qualify for a fee waiver, how many campuses can you apply to? All of them?
You could apply to 23 campuses
All
if you wish
23
to.
without a fee. Okay, and if you wish to apply to more than 4, would you have to then pay the application fee if you receive the fee waiver?
Yes, so if I applied to 5 campuses, I would get the first 4 campuses that I applied to, the fee waiver would cover that, and then I would end up paying the fee for the 5th campus that I applied.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Can we just clarify this? For a student who isn't receiving a fee waiver, is it going to be, or is it now 55 per application or 55 for 4 to apply for 4 campuses?
It's $55 per campus that they apply to.
All right, very good. I think there was some question as to that. So the waiver applies for 4 campuses to students who are receiving the fee waiver. So whatever percentage that was, beyond that, they then are going to be paying for an application if they're applying to a 5th. But for those students who are paying for the application, it's per campus.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And just to add some data that we discussed at the last meeting, for all applicants, the mean of applications per campus is about 3.2. For first-time freshmen that have a waiver, it's 3.8. And for students that paid the fee, it's about 2.8. And those numbers are pretty close for transfer students. So all transfer applicants apply to a mean of 2.4 campuses. Students with the fee waiver apply to 2.7, and then students that paid the fee apply to 2.2.
Okay, so on average, students who do not receive a fee waiver are paying about $150. Well, will be paying about 150 something.
They would pay about $140 if they applied to 2 campuses.
Right. Thank you.
Yes.
Regarding the fee waiver, now it's based on a self-reported income. Now, Cal State Applied, does it automatically read that number, that self-reported income, and then indicates you qualify for a fee waiver, or is there some accountability that an individual will review that information?
The way that the fee waiver works today is it's automatically calculated based on the information that the student inputs in their application. It's not just based on income criteria. They also have to be a California resident for tuition purposes. So applicants that are eligible for the fee waiver will automatically receive that information. If an applicant, at the end of the application process, they actually receive a message letting them know as an undergraduate applicant whether or not they're eligible for the fee waiver or not eligible for the fee waiver, so that they know whether or not they're going to be paying the fees or not paying the fees based on the fee waiver. As far as accountability for the self-reported information, in my history at the CSU, all of the information has always been self-reported for the fee waiver. And in order to verify that, it would be quite burdensome. So we would add significant more costs to our cost to process applications, because we would have to look at proof of income based on financial aid applications or other sources to be able to verify whether or not a student was eligible for a fee waiver. In addition, we would then have to collect fees from applicants that possibly don't end up coming to the CSU. So we would be in a collection process as well.
But basically, the computer does it automatically when it reaches a certain income level. Now, is that income cutoff? Is that a public information? Do all the students know what the cutoff level is?
The information is not public because we do not want to encourage people to know what that item is. We do work with all of the CSU campuses to provide them the income information, and we also provide students and applicants the ability to see what information is impacted by the application fee waiver.
Okay. And I would encourage you, with all the technology that exists now, is some way of coordinating with the financial aid offices to try to generate and marry that information into the application process. Thank you.
Yes. Trustee Simon?
I just, this conversation is helpful. I remember 50-second short story. When my husband was in hospice care, my daughter was applying to college, and we didn't have a lot, but she wanted to apply to 56 colleges.
56.
She got into most of them. And, we were applying to the UCs and the CSUs. And upon developing the application, we sat in her little room, and the fee waiver process, and this is 5 years ago, was really easy. And she received fee waivers. I mean, we didn't have a lot of income, and it wasn't verified. And if it was verified, I couldn't imagine how long that would have taken. She was given the fee waiver. I mean, I feel like it was like almost automatic that we got the fee waiver, and she was able to apply to a number of CSUs. UCs were very similar. I got to tell you, the private universities do verify, many of them, and it's a lot more cumbersome. So it allowed us in a very difficult time to be able to move through the application process. I couldn't imagine in that moment of my life shelling out, a ton of resources. Now, 5 years later, my life is very different. And with my 8-year-old, when she's applying to the CSU, and I guess 9 years, we're gonna be able to pay a little bit more, but I would really need for people who couldn't pay to be able to get that waiver. And so I think that the compelling argument, if we're in a position to give the young people in California who desperately need entry, an opportunity to not have a gated entry, more. That compelling argument it resounds with me. My fear is that, if this vote moves, the cost for families who can, will we again continue to raise the application fee? I kind of want to understand what the ceiling will be and when will a new proposal come to the board. Students who want to apply to the CSU, period, should be able to apply to the CSU, especially the students who are in the most difficult situations. I'm curious, how many fee waivers are denied annually? Fee waiver applications?
Every applicant is evaluated for the fee waiver. So regardless of their income information, every applicant goes through the same automated process. So 46% of our applicants receive fee waivers today of our undergraduate population and of our overall application pool. So I would say the number is about 64%. Also, the number of fee waivers that we grant, and if we increase the fee waiver criteria to 50%, is pretty consistent with our current students that are receiving aid, financial aid for the CSU.
So I think that's important, and I'm trying to understand it for students who apply for the fee waiver, who actually apply for the fee waiver, because some don't. How many are denied?
That's not the process today.
Got
The
it.
process today is that every applicant is reviewed for the fee waiver.
Every applicant is right. Okay.
Trustee Garcia.
Thank you. So just to clarify, if you don't qualify for the fee waiver, currently, it's $55 per campus that you want to apply to, correct? Okay, so let's think about the student on the margin again. If a student is applying to Stanford or to USC, that's one campus, right?
Right.
Thank you. Our students generally apply to give or take 3 campuses, right? Give or take. So in reality, we're not raising the application fee by $15. We're raising it by $45, right? If a student currently wants to apply to 3 campuses, cost at the $55 per application will cost them $165. If we move it to $70, apply to 3 campuses, it'll cost them $210. So I think that's also another factor to think about, that our students are applying to a system and not one campus like Stanford or USC. So just something to think about.
All right. So I think we've asked lots of questions, and it's time to come to a vote for this. This is it's an action item before the Committee on Finance. Only committee members may vote at this time. May I have a motion?
Move it.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstentions? The item is approved. It was requested that item 2, appointment of the California State University Investment Advisory Committee Chair, which is an information item, be removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion. The item will be presented by Robert Eaton, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Financing, Treasury, and Risk Management. Robert, please begin.
Robert is currently jogging to his seat.
Thank you for your patience, everyone, as I made my way over here. Thank you, Chair Kimbell. At its September 2017 meeting, the CSU Board of Trustees established the CSU Investment Advisory Committee, or the IAC as we sometimes refer to it. In establishing the membership of the Investment Advisory Committee, the board determined that the chair of the Committee on Finance would serve as the chair of the Investment Advisory Committee. The Investment Advisory Committee charter, approved by the Investment Advisory Committee in January 2018, also provides that the chair of the Committee on Finance for the board may elect to designate another board member to serve on the Investment Advisory Committee in place of the chair of the Committee on Finance of the board. For the fiscal year 2019-2020, Trustee Lillian Campbell has been appointed chair of the Committee on Finance for the Board of Trustees. And with this appointment, Trustee Campbell would now become the chair of the Investment Advisory Committee. However, Trustee Campbell has determined that it is in the best interests of the CSU for Trustee Peter Taylor to continue serving as the chair of the Investment Advisory Committee. To that end, and pursuant to the provisions of the Investment Advisory Committee Charter, Trustee Campbell has designated Trustee Taylor, and Trustee Taylor has agreed to continue serving as the chair of the Investment Advisory Committee for the 2019-2020 fiscal year. Chair Campbell, that concludes the presentation, and we're happy to address any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Trustee Eisenberg?
When, just refresh my memory, when did we create the Investment Advisory Committee and create a chair position for it? Was that 4 years ago?
September 2017.
About 2 years ago.
Yeah,
2 years ago?
about 2 years ago, yes.
2 years ago. I mean, I appreciate, your discretion in this, Vice Chair Kimbell, but I think it is helpful to have some continuity in some of these positions. And we're going to, switch up all of the chair positions again at the end of the year. And so there may be a new chair of finance, who knows? So I have no issue at all with having Peter continue in this position. I think it's a good idea.
Okay, me too. Good. Okay. Any other comments? All right. Well, moving on. It was requested, no, because it's, yeah.
Information only.
Yeah. All right. It was requested that item 3, approval to issue system-wide revenue bonds for a housing project at California State University, Long Beach, and Recreation Center expansion at San Diego State University, which is an action item, be removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion. The item will be presented by Steve Relia, Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Financial Officer. Well, it's,
I thought we approved all the consent items.
Yeah, I think you did.
why am I having?
We didn't, nobody removed anything from the.
Okay, I think there is some confusion here.
Chair Kimbell, there is an item on the consent agenda, which is the two projects that we're financing through the system-wide revenue bond program. One of those is the project we just heard earlier this morning, the Long Beach State Housing Project, and the
Yes.
other is the San Diego State Recreation Project.
I'm sorry, I misread the agenda. All right, so I think we're moving on to item 5 now?
Yes.
All right. Item 5 is an information item on the 2019-2020 final budget. The item will be presented by Steve Relia, Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Financial Officer, and Ryan Storm, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Budget. Steve, will you begin?
Thank you, Chair Kimbell. This agenda item is intended to provide a brief recap of the state's final budget decisions related to the trustees' budget request for the 2019-2020 fiscal year. So before we begin, I'd like to thank everyone involved for their effective advocacy for what turned out to be a very strong budget for the California State University. It was truly a team effort that led to the state significantly investing in the graduation initiative again this year and considerably expanding our opportunity to serve more California students. Many other needs were also met, such as full funding for the compensation for our faculty and staff, mandatory cost increases, and basic needs partnerships, as well as strong support for one-time deferred maintenance projects. The budget demonstrates that the governor and the legislature understand the central importance of the California State University to California's prosperity and future. Assistant Vice Chancellor for Budget Ryan Storm will go into more detail on the final state budget items that affect the university. Ryan?
Thank you, Steve, and it is still a good morning to everyone. Last month, the state wrapped up its work on the budget for the 2019-2020 year. Overall, the operating budget now stands at $7.1 billion per year. This includes an additional $332.8 million of ongoing state funding added to our budget this year. On top of those figures, the state provided $312.7 million of one-time funding. I agree with Steve that this is a very strong budget for the CSU. The following slides include the highlights and Chancellor's final budget decisions for 2019-20. So let's begin with the sources of new recurring, or what we call ongoing funding. The far right column shows the final state budget provides, as I said, $332.8 million from the state. And with student enrollment scheduled to grow, we anticipate $46.2 million of new tuition revenue to support the final CSU budget. Altogether, that is $379 million of new recurring funding for 1920 and is about 70% of the total budget requested by the trustees last November. Now, this slide shows the other half of the equation. This shows the intended uses of that new recurring funding and how those state decisions correspond to the budget requests adopted by the board last November. This year's budget contains very specific allocations in response to our budget request. That's different than a lump sum allocation of funding to be spread across priority areas as the chancellor deemed appropriate. Those were the way that that's the way it has been done in the past. So as such, funds have been allocated to campuses in these specific areas shown in the final budget column of the chart. So let's briefly walk through those components. We requested $75 million for the third year of Graduation Initiative 2025, and the state provided $45 million recurring and $30 million one-time, which you will see on a later slide. We requested $147.8 million for current compensation commitments, and the state fully funded this component. The same is true for mandatory costs. The state provided $45.2 million to cover healthcare premium, pension costs, and minimum wage cost increases, along with funding for maintenance of new facilities coming online this year. Next, we established an aggressive goal of increasing funded enrollment for prospective students by 5%, or about 18,200 students. Instead, a 2.7% increase, or about 10,000 students, was achieved. Still a very positive outcome. The last portion of the trustees' request to commit $80 million to address our many capital infrastructure needs was not funded. Instead, the CSU will rely on the one-time funding provided by the state, which you will see on a later slide as well. Additionally, the board's approval in 2016 and 2018 of multi-year bond authorizations will continue to fund our capital and infrastructure needs today and into the future. The governor and legislature have additional budget priorities in store for the CSU. In their final budget agreement, state leaders added both recurring and one-time funding increases for various items that were not requested in our budget plan. The other $9.8 million of recurring funding shown here is made up of $6.5 million for emergency student housing and $3.3 million for Project Rebound programs. The final budget agreement also made permanent the $7 million of funding for undocumented and immigrant legal support services. Those services are available for CSU students, faculty, and staff, but are allocated to another state agency to help manage. I just shared the results of recurring funding. Let's turn to one-time funding. As I've shared in my regular updates, the state's large surplus includes revenue that is mostly one-time in nature. As a result, the state supported many existing programs and created new programs with one-time funding. The CSU is the beneficiary of this as well. All of the $312.7 million in new one-time revenue is from state sources. Now this slide, the other half of the equation here, shows the intended uses of new one-time funding and how those state decisions correspond to the budget request adopted by the board in November. Of the $250 million requested for our deferred maintenance backlog, the state provided a significant sum of $239 million. That's nearly 7 times the amount of one-time funding for deferred maintenance provided last year. We requested $15 million for basic needs partnerships, a priority of the California State Student Association, and the state fully funded this component. And as mentioned on the previous slide, the state did not fully fund our Graduation Initiative 2025 request with ongoing funding and chose to provide $30 million in one-time dollars. And nearly $29 million in one-time allocations were made to the CSU. For example, the state provided supplemental funding for student mental health, financial aid for students during summer terms, and evaluations of potential sites for new CSU campuses. And that full list can be found in your board materials. In total, the final state budget provided $312.7 million in one-time dollars towards our budget request and for other priorities. There are some other notable items included in the state budget. CSU campuses and the Chancellor's Office have been deluged with requirements to prepare reports to the state on a variety of funded items. By my count, there are 15 new reporting requirements. 5 of these reports are tied in with the state's interest in looking at 5 possible sites for new CSU campuses. The regions are Stockton, Chula Vista, Palm Desert, San Mateo County, and Concord. And finally, a provision of the budget requires that we use $35 million of our $4 billion state appropriation to increase the number of tenure-track faculty. We are to periodically report to the state until this requirement is satisfied. If this sounds familiar, a very similar requirement was included in last year's state budget. The first report for both years are due in late 2020. And with that, Steve has some concluding remarks.
Thank you, Ryan. So as we close this year's budget process, I would like to specifically thank our students, our board members, our campus presidents, and our staff and our faculty for making the compelling case in Sacramento and elsewhere that a consistent investment in the California State University and an investment in our students ensures a strong future for California. I also want to thank our alumni, business leaders, and our friends who advocated so effectively on our behalf. Those efforts were noticed by state leaders, and clearly our collective budget advocacy efforts led to a positive budget year and a strong outcome for the university. It is our intent to turn this strong start by the governor and the legislature into a sustainable, long-term funding plan for the university. Chair Campbell, that concludes our report, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Okay, we'll start with Trustee Sebelius.
So here comes my follow-up to what I mentioned earlier. In the budget, the legislators have provided $4 million to study a possible new CSU campus. We have 23 fully built-out campuses. I would strongly urge the Chancellor's Office, when exploring these campus options, to also look at the bare-bone campus option. What I mean by that is have a building with classrooms, labs, and faculty offices, administration, and then library and student union. No sports teams, no housing, no gym, no bowling alleys. It will give and with the appropriate level of tuition and student fees, it would give the students in California or the potential students of California a cheaper option to get a public education. Whoever wouldn't like that, whoever would like to have a campus with campus life, can always choose among the other 23 campuses. If this really were to happen, we would see if it would attract a sufficient amount of students. If it does, then it would be successful and we would have provided a really true low-cost option. And if not, we can always build out this campus and make it a 24th regular campus with all the frills and campus life that the other campuses have. But I think it would be worthwhile to at least explore this as one option. And it would be much easier to build. It wouldn't require billions and billions to create this new campus. It would possibly make sense in San Mateo, which is already surrounded by 3 other CSUs that provide the full campus life for students who want to afford it. And there's so many professionals in that area that might really appreciate that low-cost option with flexible classes, maybe in addition to the continuing their professional life. So I think this is something that should be considered rather than doing more of the same, another 24th campus, imitating the 23 campuses we have already.
Okay, Trustee Morales.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you for the report, and again, thank everybody for the advocacy and the actions taken by the legislature and the governor. I have three questions. One, on the category of compensation, um, who is being compensated here? That was one question I have.
Yes, all of the currently resolved contracts or closed contracts have a certain amount of funding, earmarked or actually explained in those agreements. This funding fully funds those provisions of all of those contracts.
Okay. And then I have two other questions. One is, what's the nature of these legal services for the undocumented folks in our communities? And is there any kind of outreach or information given to the students about the availability of these? How is this being publicized or?
I could weigh in a little bit. I'm not the expert on this, but it is publicized and promoted through, I believe, the campus DACA centers where students know to go to find out what resources are available. And it is provided through the Department of Social Services, and it's because they already had an existing infrastructure to provide these services, and we didn't have to recreate it up and down the state. And they have a very robust program with widespread services for students needing these services as well as members of their family.
Well, thank you. Because, the campus that I have visited and have met with the DACA students, that's one of the things they keep asking is legal services. So thank you for that. The other is I have a question about the nature of this enhanced mental health services. What will we be able to provide with this additional sum of money?
I think that's still open for some discussion. Basically, the Budget Act includes one line that says $3 million for mental health services. That's the guidance that we've given on that. But there are still some decisions that need to be made here in the Chancellor's office on how best to utilize that small amount of one-time money.
Thank you.
I might add that with this one, with the mental health services, is providing an opportunity as well for our campuses to connect more with their local county officials to show how we can expand services to offer our students in mental health.
Thank you.
Trustee Morales, before you leave your question, when Ryan answered the question on compensation costs, he mentioned all the contracts, but this is for both represented and non-represented employees. So I just want to make sure that's clear.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Trustee McGrory and then Trustee Adamson.
I'm sorry. I think it's an important point from Steve. Really, Steve, for the non-bargained employees, what percentage was funded?
It was 3% for all non-bargain employees, and that number is also very close to the bargain employees number.
The Prop 63 money that there's reference in the budget, that is the 1% income tax override? Is that what that? I have read in several reports in Los Angeles and in San Diego that the counties have piled up an incredible amount of those revenues. And I think I'm hoping that 3 million can be leveraged to bring county services onto the campuses, because I think it would be a tremendous boost for mental services. And I think it's a great kind of public partnership with the counties. So hopefully that will be an aggressive action that we undertake this year. Second, I'm kind of interested in how you're going to take the graduation initiative. 45 million is recurring money and 30 million is non-recurring. What the heck do you do with a non-recurring line item? You can't hire anybody.
Yes, but you can offer professional development programs for faculty to make sure that the kinds of instruction that are being offered to students, especially students that come from underrepresented groups, that type of educational experience is going to be as rich as possible. There's a real focus you can use with one-time dollars on student engagement as well as well-being. Looking at increasing financial aid or emergency loans for students, especially those that just need a small amount in order to keep them persisting and graduating on time. We've got a list of about 20 different items, so there are quite a few one-time costs that our campuses incur that allow them to be responsive to student needs.
Okay, great. Sounds like you have a plan.
Trustee McGrory, Vice Chancellor Blanchard, I think also, even we don't do permanent faculty hires on temporary money, but those who are working at a part-time basis could actually have a higher fraction of an appointment for a year in order to teach an additional class or whatever. So there's quite a portfolio of uses for those dollars, and they'll be used wisely to help advance the objectives of the grad initiative.
My last question is, what is the process going to be to study the I guess it's the feasibility of these 5 campuses, proposed new campuses?
Where's the 5th one? I think there was only no. I think this is a work in progress, and we've just gotten a directive, so we're working with the folks in Sacramento to come up with a process, making sure that we're doing the analytical work objectively in terms of needs, forecast out over the next decades in advance. So this is yet to be precisely defined, other than the goal is to make a needs assessment in various areas of the state with some specific recommendations with respect to the Stockton area and the San Diego area, among others.
I guess I just make an editorial comment that before we even begin to think about seriously a new campus, it seems to me we need to have some kind of a sustainable financial model with the legislature. Because to add the expense of another 1 or 2 campuses when we already have kind of an exacerbated budgeting problem where we roll from one year to the next, if we were to do something like that, we better have a good model in place.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, to the Chancellor, his staff, to the presidents, to our faculty, our students, our alums that all participated in this budget process with the state. I think we owe all of them a great round of applause for the work that they've done on this budget. My question, however, is we requested $819 million in this budget. We funded $692 million of it. So the $127 million that we did not receive, what impact does that have on what we were planning when we submitted this $819 million? And I realize 70 million of it is really one line, and that's enrollment growth. But there's still an additional 55 million that we contemplated. What will we not be doing that we anticipated that we would do?
I'll ask, I will answer, but I'll ask Ryan to back me, come up with whatever holes I'm leaving in the answer. First of all, Trustee Adamson, you've already identified what the biggest delta is in between the ask of the trustees and what the governor gave us, and that's in enrollment. The trustees had, I think, a very well justified but significant ask of a 5% enrollment increase. So this simply means we will not be able to provide access at the level we were hoping to. That 5% was not a random number that the trustees came up with. We've looked very carefully at the Public Policy Institute of California's forecast for the needs of California for degrees, and we really should be at that level for now until really the year 2030, growing at that level as well as achieving the goals of the graduation initiative to meet that demand for California degrees. Another area was the graduation initiative. So we had asked for $75 million of recurring money for the graduation initiative, and we got a portion of that, and the $45 million. The $30 million delta was put into one-time money, as Trustee McGrory commented. That ties our hands a bit because it's not recurring. We can't do everything we want, and so we're going to hopefully advocate to get that put back at some point in the next year's budget as recurring dollars. In addition, we had asked for recurring dollars for deferred maintenance of about $80 million, I believe, and what was granted to us was essentially zero of deferred maintenance in recurring dollars, but a pretty big plus up in the one-time area. So, and this is something, if you look at the governor's budget across the board for all of the agencies, This was kind of a trend that he tended to shift a lot of recurring obligations to one time. In fact, I think of his allocations across all state agencies, about 86% of that was in the category of one time. And I think what he's doing, which I have to say is probably wise, is anticipating that in the next 24 months or so, there'll be some sort of business downturn. So is trying to limit the recurring obligations. What did I miss, Ryan? Okay, I think that's it.
Trustee Sebelius?
Okay. The CFA, California Faculty Association, claims that the budget, and I quote, includes 35 million designated for new tenure track faculty hiring. That was not reflected at all in the agendas that we received. Ryan Storm did mention, among other notable items, new faculty hiring requirement. There's a difference, though, between new faculty hiring and hiring on tenure track. I think that difference is important. We should reflect that if that is the case, that this money was earmarked for tenure track hiring. Tenure track faculty is much more crucial to student success, and many studies have shown that. And I wonder if the CFA statement is correct, where in our budget that is broken down in the agenda is that reflected? Where will this $35 million come from? Will that be money from the graduation initiative? Obviously not, because there's $30 million in one-time funding. We cannot sustain tenure track hiring. I wish I could see where that is reflected. Where would we take that money from? And also on the last page in the agenda, when the conclusion ends with the sentence, with these investments, the CSU will, and there are 5 priorities listed, tenure track hires are not listed. And I think that should be a priority for the CSU.
Again, I'm going to thank you, Trustee Sebelius. I'm going to try to answer that first question about where is that $35 million coming from. The way I understand the statute, and this is perhaps a bit of a nuance, but I think it's really important, is that the way this was allocated was not to allocate it as part of the that commitment, not to allocate it as part of the incremental dollars that CSU is getting, but rather say that the CSU should do this out of its entire budget. So that is a bit different from what we've seen in the past. And Ryan, do you want to expand on it? Because Ryan has been close to kind of the sausage making in this, so he may know a little bit more.
Right. For last year's amount, which was $25 million, and this year's amount of $35 million, in both instances in the Budget Act of those years, it states that of this item, which means of the $4 billion, $35 million of this money shall be used to hire tenure track faculty. So it's our intention, obviously, to comply with that requirement. The other thing to note about that language in the Budget Act is that by its construct, it says that that report shall be delivered by 2020 and every 2 years thereafter until those dollar amounts are satisfied. So the goal here, I think the intent by the legislature and the administration was to provide us some flexibility in terms of balancing all of our needs, including also the joint goal of trying to add more tenure track faculty. We all know the value of adding tenure track faculty to our campuses, and there is data on our website that demonstrates that we are in an upward trajectory in terms of additional new tenure track faculty. But we will report, and we will be using essentially all of our existing appropriations to meet that goal, and we'll be reporting on that in 2020.
Okay. Seeing no more questions, Chairman Day, that concludes the business of the Committee on Finance.
If I might just add, part of the delayed reporting is the recognition, as you well know, that when budgets are established in essentially July, the tenure track hiring for the academic year that is starting in July or a month or two later won't happen. It really then will be during this course of this upcoming year where faculty and departments do their searches, et cetera. So there is a time latency, and that's why the reporting is flexible to the first report after the first possible year of change, but then recognizing that, as you well know, Trustee Sebelius, many times the offers are not accepted, and so there are searches that don't get completed, and campuses stay at it till they do.
Thank you, Chair Kimbell. We will now adjourn for lunch, and we will return at 1:10 p.m.
Live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly. This is the California State University Office of the Chancellor's live stream. Please adjust your audio accordingly.